The massive judgment chamber of the Galactic Council stretched before Ambassador Jack Reynolds like an ocean of alien life. The curved ceiling, higher than any human cathedral, simulated the vastness of space itself with glowing stars and slowly moving nebulae. The chamber housed thousands of alien representatives from across the galaxy, all seated in tiered rings that rose from the central platform. Their murmurs, clicks, and electronic translations blended into a sea of noise that echoed through the enormous space. Reynolds stood alone on the central platform, a single human in a dark blue suit amid the swirling colors and strange forms of the assembled galactic powers. His heart pounded in his chest, but his face remained calm, betraying none of the anxiety he felt representing Earth in this crucial moment. Earth, only recently discovered by the interstellar community, stood accused of serious violations of galactic law. The charges: unauthorized weapons development, dangerous military expansion, and refusal to submit to proper oversight. Reynolds, a former military strategist turned diplomat, knew this hearing would determine humanity's future among the stars. High Counselor Drelax rose from the central panel. The towering insectoid, nearly 9 feet tall with a gleaming blue-black carapace and compound eyes that shimmered with intelligence, spoke in perfect English through translator implants. "The evidence against Earth is overwhelming," Drelax announced, his voice booming through the chamber. "You have been developing technologies expressly forbidden by galactic law." Reynolds kept his hands steady at his sides. "What technologies specifically, High Counselor?" "Your directed energy weapons, your antimatter experiments, your neural interface systems." Drelax's mandibles clicked with irritation. "All prohibited for non-council races." Reynolds nodded slightly. "Technologies we developed independently, without knowledge of your laws." "Ignorance does not excuse the violation," hissed Counselor Vex, a serpentine diplomat from the Orion Arm. Her scales shifted color from green to orange as she spoke, a sign of agitation in her species. "The penalty is quarantine. Your system will be isolated by our fleets until compliance is assured." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Reynolds noticed several military representatives leaning forward with interest. "If I may address the Council," Reynolds said, his voice steady, "Earth has existed in isolation for our entire history. We developed these technologies to protect ourselves in a universe we knew nothing about. When we discovered we weren't alone, we immediately sought peaceful contact. Yet you concealed your military capabilities," countered another council member, a floating orb of pulsing light contained within a transparent shell. "Your initial contact teams claimed your civilization was far less advanced." Reynolds smiled slightly. "We were cautious. Would you have been different in our position?" The chamber erupted in shouted objections and angry gestures from 100 different species. Reynolds stood firm as the storm of noise washed over him. High Counselor Drelax raised his upper limbs, calling for order. From the shadows beyond the central panel emerged a figure that caused even Drelax to fall silent. Grand General Krovak of the Hegemony stepped into the light. The Hegemony was a militaristic empire that controlled dozens of star systems at the edge of Council space, and they'd been pushing for human containment since first contact. Krovak stood 8 feet tall, his body covered in crimson scales that gleamed under the chamber lights. Cybernetic enhancements ran along his spine and across his shoulders, pulsing with energy. His face was reptilian, with 4 yellow eyes set in a wide skull. "I have heard enough," Krovak announced, his deep voice resonating through the chamber without need for amplification. "The humans represent a clear threat to galactic stability." He approached the central platform, towering over Reynolds. "I have assembled 1,000,000 troops at the edge of your solar system," he announced. "A fleet of our finest warships stands ready. Your primitive defenses will fall within hours. The Council has debated long enough. The Hegemony will handle this threat." A heavy silence fell over the chamber. Even those who had been hostile to Earth seemed shocked by Krovak's bold statement. The General's announcement was effectively a declaration of war. Reynolds opened his mouth to respond, but a new figure stepped from behind him. Captain Diana Torres of the Earth Defense Force moved forward, her uniform bearing the scars of recent battles, her expression unreadable. She hadn't been scheduled to speak, but Reynolds recognized her authority in military matters and stepped aside. "Good," she said, her voice carrying through the silent chamber. "I have 1,000,000 targets." The Council erupted in outrage. Torres raised her hand, activating a holographic display that materialized in the air above the platform. It showed Earth's supposedly primitive defenses, orbital platforms housing weapons beyond even Council understanding, fleets of ships using technologies the aliens thought impossible, and defensive systems that had already mapped and targeted every vessel in Krovak's approaching armada. "We didn't come seeking war," Torres continued, silencing the chaos. "But make no mistake, we came prepared for one." Krovak's four eyes narrowed dangerously. "You dare threaten the might of the hegemony?" "No threat," Torres replied calmly. "Just facts. Your ships entered our system 12 hours ago. We've been tracking them since they left your space 3 weeks ago." She expanded the hologram, showing the positions of hegemony vessels throughout the solar system, each tagged with detailed information about their capabilities, weaknesses, and optimal targeting solutions as we speak. "Your vessels are being tracked by defense systems you haven't detected. We have countermeasures for every weapon in your arsenal. We know the structural weaknesses of every ship class you're fielding." Torres looked directly at Krovak. "We've run simulations of this exact scenario 10,000 times. Would you like to know your average casualties?" Counselor Vex slithered forward. "This is outrageous." "You stand accused of violations and you respond with threats?" Reynolds stepped forward again. "Not threats. Captain Torres is explaining our position. The hegemony has moved a war fleet into our system without provocation. We're within our rights to defend ourselves." "Your primitive species cannot possibly," Krovak began. Torres interrupted him by expanding the holographic display further, showing detailed schematics of hegemony ship designs, weapon systems, and tactical doctrines, information that should have been impossible for humans to obtain. "How did you acquire this?" demanded Drelax, his compound eyes fixed on the display. "We've been studying you," Reynolds explained. "All of you. Since first contact." Another council member, a being made of what appeared to be living crystal, chimed in. "This level of intelligence gathering violates multiple council protocols." "Protocols that weren't shared with us," Reynolds countered. "We were told we were being welcomed into a peaceful galactic community. Meanwhile, the hegemony was preparing for invasion." The chamber fell into uneasy silence as the implications sank in. Humanity had been underestimated severely. High Counselor Drelax's mandibles clicked rapidly as he conferred with other council members. Finally, he turned back to the human representatives. "This situation has clearly escalated beyond a simple hearing," he announced. "Ambassador Reynolds, Captain Torres, you will accompany a select group of council representatives to a secure chamber for further discussion. General Krovak, you will join us." He turned to the assembly. "This session is temporarily adjourned." As they were led from the main chamber, Torres leaned close to Reynolds. "They're stalling. Krovak's forces are still advancing." Reynolds nodded slightly. "I know, but we've bought time for our defensive grid to fully activate." "And if diplomacy fails?" Torres asked quietly. Reynolds looked at the alien dignitaries walking ahead of them, then at Krovak's imposing form. "Then we show them exactly how prepared we really are." The small group entered a secure chamber off the main hall. As the doors sealed behind them, screens on the walls activated, showing real-time feeds from throughout the solar system. Krovak watched with growing fury as his surprise invasion fleet was revealed to be completely compromised. Earth wasn't just ready for this confrontation, they had been preparing for it since the moment they learned they weren't alone in the universe, and now the real negotiations were about to begin. The secure chamber deep within the Galactic Council headquarters hummed with tension. Unlike the Grand Assembly Hall, this room was designed for true power. A circular table surrounded by 12 seats, walls lined with screens showing real-time data from across the galaxy. Ambassador Jack Reynolds and Captain Diana Torres sat opposite High Counselor Drelax, Counselor Vex, and 3 other members of the Council's inner circle. Grand General Krovak stood to one side, his crimson scales darkening with barely controlled rage. "Before we continue these discussions," Drelax began, his insectoid form looming over the table, "we must address the deception. You have misrepresented Earth's technological capabilities since first contact." Reynolds remained calm. "And you have misrepresented the nature of the Galactic Council." With a gesture, Torres activated a holographic display in the center of the table. It showed a recording, one the Council had never seen before. The footage was grainy, clearly taken from a damaged camera system. "What is this?" hissed Counselor Vex, her serpentine body coiling tighter. The true first contact between humanity and alien life, Reynolds explained. 50 years ago, not 7 years ago as officially recorded. The recording showed an Earth orbital station, primitive by current standards, and an approaching vessel of clearly alien design. The alien ship fired without warning, damaging the station. Earth defense systems, basic but effective, returned fire. The damaged alien vessel was captured by Earth forces. Impossible, whispered one of the council members, a being of flowing liquid metal contained within a field of energy. We would have records of this encounter. The ship was a hegemony scout, Torres continued, focusing her gaze on Krovac. They erased their records and activated self-destruct protocols. But they failed. Reynolds picked up the narrative. We recovered technology, data, and eventually revived 2 crew members. We learned about the galaxy beyond our system, including the power dynamics that would threaten a newcomer like Earth. Drelax's compound eyes studied the humans with new intensity. So you've known about the greater galaxy for 50 years, not 7? Yes, Reynolds confirmed. And we spent those decades preparing for this exact moment. Torres expanded the holographic display, showing the evolution of Earth's defenses over 50 years, a systematic reverse engineering of alien technology combined with humanity's unique innovations. You did all this based on a single scout ship? Krovac demanded incredulously. We did all this because the first aliens who found us tried to destroy us, Torres countered. It taught us caution. One of the council members, a being of pure energy contained within a humanoid form, spoke for the first time. Your species learns quickly. Too quickly, Vex hissed. This level of advancement from a single technological sample should be impossible. Reynolds smiled slightly. Perhaps you've underestimated human ingenuity. Drelax leaned forward. So when you made official contact 7 years ago, we knew exactly who we were dealing with, Reynolds confirmed. We maintained the illusion of being less advanced to avoid appearing threatening, and to see how the Council would treat a seemingly vulnerable species. Torres turned to face Krovac directly. And now we know. The General's cybernetic implants pulsed with angry light. This changes nothing. High forces. Torres interrupted by activating another display showing the current positions of hegemony ships in the solar system. Your forces are currently surrounded by our defense grid. Each vessel is targeted by multiple weapon systems. Meanwhile, aboard the hegemony flagship approaching Earth's orbit, Commander Lith rushed into the command center. Unlike most of her species, her scales were silver rather than crimson, marking her as part of the scientific caste elevated to military command. General's not responding to communications, she announced to the bridge crew. We're continuing as planned. The tactical officer, a burly hegemony male named Drax, looked up from his console. Commander, I'm detecting energy signatures throughout the system that weren't in our intelligence reports. Lith moved to his station, examining the data. What kind of signatures? Unknown technology, Drax admitted. But they're targeting parameters. They've locked onto every ship in our fleet simultaneously. Lith felt a cold sensation along her spine, where her own minimal cybernetics connected to her nervous system. Show me. The tactical display revealed hundreds of previously undetected installations throughout the solar system, on moons, asteroids, and in orbit around multiple planets. Each installation was now active and targeting hegemony vessels. The humans couldn't possibly have built all this, she whispered. Our intelligence said they barely had interplanetary capability. A communications officer turned from his station. Commander, we're receiving a transmission from Earth Defense Command. On screen, Lith ordered. The screen showed a human officer, not Torres, but another woman with dark skin and close-cropped white hair. Hegemony vessels, this is Admiral Helena Frost of Earth Defense Force. You have entered sovereign Earth space with hostile intent. You will power down weapon systems and maintain position immediately. Drax snarled. They dare give us orders? Lith silenced him with a gesture, studying the human admiral's calm confidence. Something was very wrong. What happens if we refuse, Admiral? Frost's expression remained neutral. Then we will demonstrate why that would be unwise. You have 5 minutes to comply. The transmission ended. Lith turned to her crew. Run full spectrum analysis of those installations. I want to know what we're facing. Commander, the tactical officer said, voice suddenly strained. The energy readings are increasing. They're powering up weapons. Battle stations, Lith ordered. Prepare defensive systems. She hesitated, then added, and begin calculating withdrawal vectors. Withdrawal? Drax questioned, shocked. We have 1,000,000 troops ready for deployment. Lith turned to him, silver scales gleaming under the emergency lights. And they appear to have 1,000,000 ways to stop us. Back in the council chamber, the screen suddenly flashed with alerts. Krovak's personal communicator chimed urgently. It seems, Reynolds observed, your forces are preparing to attack. Krovak checked his communicator, his expression darkening. My second-in-command reports unknown defense installations throughout your system. Not unknown to us, Torres replied. They've been there for decades. Drilax raised his upper limbs. General Krovak, order your forces to stand down immediately. This council has not authorized military action. The hegemony does not always wait for council authorization, Krovak growled, but he activated his communicator. Commander Lith, hold position. Do not engage. The screens showed the hegemony fleet continuing its advance. They're not complying, Torres noted calmly. Communications delay, Krovak insisted. Reynolds shook his head. No, your vessels received the transmission. They're choosing to proceed. He turned to the council members, which raises the question, was this invasion planned with council knowledge, or is the hegemony acting independently? The council members exchanged uneasy glances. Vex's scales shifted to a deep blue, a sign of discomfort in her species. The council did not authorize this action, Drilax stated firmly. But you knew it was coming, Reynolds pressed, and chose not to warn us. Before any council member could respond, the screens flared with new information. Throughout the solar system, Earth's defense grid had fully activated, not just around Earth but across all planets and major moons. Hidden installations that had remained dormant for years were powering up simultaneously. Torres received a communication through her earpiece. She nodded once, then addressed the room. Admiral Frost has issued a final warning to the hegemony fleet. They have refused to comply. You must give them more time, Krovak demanded. Time to organize their attack? Torres asked. I don't think so. On the screen's energy readings spiked across the solar system. Krovak stared in disbelief at the tactical displays. What have you done? He whispered. Reynolds leaned forward. We've spent 50 years preparing for this day, hoping it would never come, but ready if it did. Torres looked directly at Krovak. You should know. We gave your forces every opportunity to withdraw. On the main screen, Earth's orbital defense platforms began to glow with energy. Installations on Mars, Europa, and even distant Pluto activated simultaneously. A web of defensive systems, perfectly coordinated, encompassed the entire solar system. This is impossible, one of the council members breathed. No species could build defenses this extensive without detection. We had help, Reynolds admitted. Not all species in the galaxy agree with the Council's methods of controlling technological development. Drilax's compound eyes fixed on Reynolds. You've been working with Council dissidents. We've been working with those who believe in true cooperation, not domination, Reynolds corrected. The screen showed the first hegemony vessels opening fire on Earth's orbital platforms. The energy beam struck advanced shield systems, dissipating harmlessly, and now, Torres said quietly, we demonstrate why that was a mistake. Earth's defense systems returned fire, not with random destruction, but with precisely targeted shots that disabled the hegemony vessel's weapon systems without destroying the ships themselves. You're not trying to destroy them, Vex observed, surprised. The hegemony's lead warships entered the outer reaches of the solar system with overwhelming force, or so they believed. As the massive vessels passed Neptune's orbit, they encountered the first layer of Earth's true defenses. What had appeared to be natural formations in Neptune's rings suddenly shifted position. Hundreds of automated drone platforms emerged from hiding within the ice, their surfaces designed to mimic the surrounding debris. Commander Leith stood on the bridge of the hegemony flagship, her silver scales reflecting the emergency lights as warning signals flashed across every console. What are those? She demanded, pointing at the swarm of objects now surrounding her advance fleet. Unknown devices, the tactical officer replied, his voice tight with tension. They weren't there in our scans moments ago. Impossible, Lith muttered. Nothing could hide from our sensors. But the evidence was undeniable. The drone platforms weren't just deploying conventional weapons. They activated gravitational lensing technology that distorted space itself around the hegemony vessels. 3 cruisers, unable to compensate for the sudden spatial distortion, collided in a catastrophic impact. "Evasive maneuvers," Lith ordered, gripping her command console as the flagship shuddered under the strain of fighting against the distorted space. "Get us clear of their range." "We can't determine their range," the navigator responded, panic evident in his voice. "The technology is like nothing we've encountered." On Earth, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, the Global Defense Command Center buzzed with controlled activity. Massive holographic displays showed the battle unfolding throughout the solar system. Admiral Marcus Blackwood, a tall man with dark skin and a close-cropped silver beard, stood at the central command station. Captain Torres had described him as a tactical genius, a description as calm. Coordination of the system-wide defense now proved accurate. "Neptune. Defense ring performing as expected," a young officer reported. "Hegemony advanced fleet is contained." Blackwood nodded. "Good. Activate the Jovian defense ring." Near Jupiter, massive installations hidden within the gas giant's perpetual storms awakened. Energy readings spiked as they generated a field that spread outward from the massive planet. The field wasn't designed to destroy. Instead, it disrupted the hegemony's faster-than-light communications, isolating each section of their fleet. "Comms disruption field active," another officer confirmed. Hegemony fleet segments are now operating independently without central coordination. Blackwood's expression remained impassive, but a slight smile touched his lips. "Perfect. Deploy the Mars contingent." In the secure council chamber, Ambassador Reynolds and Captain Torres observed the battle through secure feeds. The council members watched in stunned silence as Earth's defense system systematically neutralized what should have been an overwhelming invasion force. "How did you build all this without detection?" asked a Cetarian representative, her translucent tendrils waving in agitation. The floating jellyfish-like alien had remained quiet until now, but could no longer contain her astonishment. "Carefully," Torres replied simply, "and over a very long time." "You've had 50 years to prepare," Reynolds added, "since our true first contact. We used that time wisely." High Counselor Drelax's compound eyes reflected the battle displays. "These technologies, some are beyond even council development level." "As we said," Reynolds explained, "we had help from groups that don't share the council's philosophy on technological control." Counselor Vex slithered closer to the display, her serpentine form coiling with tension. "The hegemony fleet is being herded," Torres nodded, "toward prearranged containment zones. We don't want to destroy them if we don't have to." Grand General Krovac watched in silent fury as his carefully planned offensive crumbled. His crimson scales had darkened to an almost black hue, a sign of extreme stress in his species. "This is not possible," he finally growled. "No single system could defeat the might of the hegemony." "Yet here we are," Torres replied evenly. On the screens, a new development. Thousands of smaller hegemony vessels were breaking from the main fleet, heading directly for Earth's orbital defenses. "Boarding parties," Krovac announced with grim satisfaction. "If we can't destroy your platforms, we'll capture them." Torres received an alert through her earpiece and smiled slightly. Exactly as predicted. The screens shifted to show Earth's orbital defense ring, a series of platforms housing advanced weapon systems and shield generators. The approaching hegemony boarding craft swarmed toward them, clearly intending to overwhelm the defenses through sheer numbers. "You may have impressive technology," Krovac said, "but my troops are the finest warriors in the galaxy. 1,000,000 elite soldiers trained for boarding actions. Your automated defenses won't stop them once they're inside." Reynolds and Torres exchanged a glance. "Who said our defenses were automated?" Reynolds asked quietly. The screens showed the first wave of hegemony boarding craft breaching an orbital platform. Troops in heavy armor poured through the breach points only to encounter squads of human soldiers in advanced combat suits. What followed wasn't just a firefight but a demonstration of human combat prowess. The aliens' numerical advantage meant little against defenders who had trained specifically for this scenario. "Your soldiers fight as if they've faced our tactics before," Counselor Vex observed suspiciously. "We've been simulating this war for decades," Reynolds admitted. "Every possible enemy, every possible tactic." Krovac leaned forward, watching the screens intently. "Impossible. Our combat doctrines are classified at the highest levels. Yet not impossible to discover, Torres countered. If you know where to look. In the orbital platform designated Defense Ring Alpha, Major Lisa Donovan led her squad through the burning corridor. Her combat suit enhanced her natural abilities. Its dark blue armor covered with adaptive camouflage that shifted to match the surroundings. She had trained for this exact scenario hundreds of times in simulation, but the real thing still set her heart pounding. Contact front, her point man called through the comm system. 20+ hostiles, heavy weapons. Donovan raised her fist, signaling the squad to hold position. Pattern Sigma, she ordered calmly. Her soldiers immediately reconfigured their formation, taking positions that seemed to make no tactical sense, until the hegemony troops rounded the corner and fired exactly where a standard defensive line would have been. Now, Donovan commanded. Her squad opened fire from their unexpected positions, catching the hegemony forces completely by surprise. The alien troops fell back in confusion, their coordinated attack dissolving into chaos. They're regrouping, the squad's tactical officer reported. Bringing up their heavy units. Donovan nodded inside her helmet. Good, exactly as expected. Fall back to Point Charlie. Her squad retreated in perfect order, setting up the next phase of their defense. They weren't just fighting. They were executing a carefully choreographed plan designed to draw the hegemony forces deeper into the station where Earth's true defenses awaited. Aboard the hegemony flagship, now retreating toward Mars under pressure from Earth's outer defenses, Commander Lith received disturbing reports from her boarding teams. The humans knew exactly where we would breach, her ground commander reported, his voice strained. They were waiting with precisely configured defenses. How many platforms have we secured? Lith demanded. None, Commander. We've breached 12, but face organized resistance in all of them. Lith studied the tactical display with growing dread. The human defense wasn't just effective, it was methodical, as if they were following a script written long before the battle began. They've been planning for this specific attack, she realized aloud. For years. In the council chamber, the battle displays showed the conflict spreading across the solar system. Earth's forces weren't just defending, they were executing a complex strategy that seemed to anticipate every hegemony move. Your defensive doctrine is impressive, admitted another council member, a being composed of crystalline structures that shifted and reconfigured as it spoke. But surely you can't maintain this level of coordination across an entire star system. As if in answer, the displays showed a new development. Hidden shipyards on Mercury suddenly revealed their presence, launching squadrons of vessels unlike anything the Council had seen before. Smaller than hegemony warships but faster and more maneuverable, these ships moved in perfect formation, targeting key vulnerabilities in the now scattered hegemony fleet. Those ships, Krovac muttered, studying their design, they're built specifically to counter our vessel classes. Yes, Torres confirmed simply. Reynolds turned to the council members. We want to make something very clear. Earth doesn't seek conquest or dominance. We developed these defenses for one purpose only, to ensure our survival in a galaxy that we discovered was not always welcoming to new species. Drilax's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of deep thought in his species. Yet you concealed these capabilities. You misled the Council. As the Council misled us, Reynolds countered. You presented yourselves as benevolent guardians, while allowing the hegemony to prepare for our conquest. The accusation hung in the air, met with uncomfortable silence from the Council representatives. On the Red Planet, installations buried beneath the Martian surface activated a powerful gravitational field. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council had never been so full. Representatives from over 2,000 worlds crowded the tiered seating, their murmurs, clicks, and electronic translations creating a constant background hum. At the center of the massive chamber, the raised speaking platform awaited the day's unprecedented proceedings. 2 weeks had passed since Earth's defense systems had neutralized the hegemony invasion force. 2 weeks of intense negotiation, strategic repositioning, and fundamental reassessment of humanity's place in the galactic community. Now, the Council had reconvened in emergency session to address the new reality. High Counselor Drilax entered from the main doorway, his insectoid form immediately commanding attention. Behind him came the full Council, 48 representatives of the most powerful civilizations in the explored galaxy. They took their positions at the central panel, their variety of forms representing the diverse evolution of intelligent life across countless worlds. And then, from a side entrance, came the Earth delegation. Ambassador Jack Reynolds led the group, followed by Captain Diana Torres and Admiral Marcus Blackwood. They moved with calm confidence to the central platform, facing not just the Council but the representatives of the galactic community. Drelax raised his upper limbs for silence, and the assembly fell quiet. "This emergency session of the Galactic Council is now in session," he announced, his translator carrying his words to every corner of the vast chamber. "The matter before us concerns the recent conflict in the Sol system and its implications for galactic governance." He turned to face the human delegation directly. "Ambassador Reynolds, you may address the assembly." Reynolds stepped forward, his expression serious but composed. "Thank you, High Counselor. Representatives of the galactic community, I stand before you today not as a supplicant but as an equal. 2 weeks ago, Earth faced an unprovoked invasion by hegemony forces, an invasion that we successfully repelled." Murmurs spread through the assembly at his direct statement. Most species would approach the Council with carefully measured deference, but the humans showed no such inclination. The conflict revealed several truths that can no longer be ignored, Reynolds continued. First, that Earth possesses defensive capabilities beyond what many believe possible for a newly contacted civilization. Second, that the current structure of galactic governance failed to prevent this conflict. Indeed, elements within the Council were aware of the hegemony's intentions and chose not to intervene. Loud objections erupted from several sections of the assembly. Drelax called for order, his voice cutting through the chaos. "These are serious accusations, Ambassador," he stated once silence had returned. "They are facts, High Counselor," Reynolds replied calmly. "Facts we can prove with communications intercepted before and during the conflict." He gestured to Captain Torres, who activated a holographic display. It showed records of communications between Hegemony Command and certain Council representatives, clearly indicating prior knowledge of the planned invasion. "The Hegemony's actions violated multiple provisions of galactic law," Reynolds continued, "yet no action was taken to prevent them. This raises fundamental questions about the Council's ability or willingness to enforce the very laws it creates." In a secure observation room adjoining the Assembly Hall, Grand General Krovac watched the proceedings with barely contained fury. Though technically a prisoner, protocol required his presence for these negotiations. Commander Lith stood beside him, her silver scales dull with the shame of defeat. "They humiliate us before the entire galaxy," Krovac growled. "They defeated us fairly," Lith replied quietly. "Perhaps it is time to reconsider our approach." Krovac turned to her, his cybernetic implants pulsing with anger. "You suggest surrender?" "I suggest adaptation," Lith countered. "The humans have changed the equation. We must change our calculations accordingly." On the central platform, Admiral Blackwood had taken Reynolds' place. His military bearing and calm authority commanded attention from even the most dismissive Council members. "The Hegemony fleet has been neutralized," he informed the Assembly. "Their vessels are contained but undamaged. Their troops have been disarmed but treated according to the highest standards of galactic law for prisoners of war." He activated a new display, showing the current status of the captured Hegemony forces. 1 million troops in temporary holding facilities, being provided with appropriate food, medical care, and living quarters according to their species' needs. "Earth has no interest in prolonging this conflict," Blackwood continued. "We are prepared to release all Hegemony personnel and vessels under specific conditions." "What conditions?" called out a Council member representing a species of crystalline beings. Blackwood nodded to Captain Torres, who brought up another display showing Earth's proposed terms. "First, formal recognition of Earth's sovereignty and our right to maintain defensive capabilities without Council oversight," Torres explained. "Second, a non-aggression pact with the Hegemony guaranteed by the full Council. Third, reparations for the unprovoked attack on our system, not in resources or territory, but in technological exchange and access to educational databases." The Assembly erupted in surprised discussion. Most expected demands for territory, resources, or punitive measures against the Hegemony. Earth's focus on knowledge and recognition seemed almost incomprehensible to species accustomed to traditional power politics. In the observation room, Krovac stared at the display in confusion. They want information? After defeating 1 million of our finest troops? They value knowledge over conquest, Lith observed. An interesting priority. Back in the assembly hall, Reynolds had resumed speaking. Earth does not seek dominance or expansion. We seek security and the freedom to develop without external control. The current system of technological restrictions imposed by the Council has not created peace. It has merely centralized power. He gestured expansively to the gathered representatives. How many species here have been denied technologies that could have saved lives on their worlds? How many have been forced to purchase at exorbitant rates what they could have developed themselves if permitted? Uncomfortable murmurs spread through the assembly. Reynolds had touched on a long-standing source of resentment among many younger civilizations. Counselor Vex slithered forward, her serpentine form rising to its full height. You propose to dismantle thousands of years of established order because of one conflict? No, Reynolds countered. I propose to evolve that order into something more equitable and effective. Earth stands ready to share certain defensive technologies with peaceful worlds, technologies that would make aggression too costly for expansionist powers like the hegemony. The implications of this statement sent shockwaves through the assembly. Earth was proposing to fundamentally alter the balance of power that had defined galactic politics for millennia. This is unprecedented, objected another council member. A being composed of interconnected nodes of light. No species has ever offered to share restricted technologies across multiple civilizations. Perhaps that's the problem, Torres interjected. The monopoly on advanced technology has created inequality, not stability. High Counselor Drelax's compound eyes studied the human delegation carefully. What you propose would transform the very nature of this council and its authority. Yes, Reynolds acknowledged simply. Because the current system failed. It failed Earth. It failed the worlds conquered by the hegemony. It failed to create the peace it promised. In a private chamber after the main session adjourned for deliberation, a smaller meeting took place. Reynolds, Torres, and Blackwood sat across from Drelax, Vex, and 3 other senior council members. The tension in the room was palpable. Your proposal has created significant division within the council, Drelax admitted. Many see it as a direct challenge to our authority. It is, Reynolds confirmed without apology. The current structure hasn't delivered the peace and stability it promised. We're proposing an alternative. An alternative that places Earth at the center of a new power structure, Vex observed, her scales shifting to a deep blue of suspicion. Not at the center, Blackwood corrected, as one voice among many. The difference is that smaller, younger civilizations would have more say in their own development. Torres activated a small holographic display showing a revised structure for galactic governance, one with distributed authority rather than centralized control. We've studied thousands of governance systems throughout human history, she explained. Centralization of power inevitably leads to corruption and stagnation. Distributed systems with appropriate checks and balances have proven more stable and adaptable. Your species has existed for a fraction of the time this council has governed, one of the other council members objected. Yet you presume to lecture us on governance? Sometimes fresh perspectives are valuable precisely because they aren't bound by traditional thinking, Reynolds replied diplomatically. The door to the chamber opened, and Commander Lith entered, escorted by council security. The silver-scaled hegemony officer stood at attention, her expression carefully neutral. Commander, Drelax acknowledged. You requested this audience. Speak. Lith's 4-fingered hands clasped behind her back in a formal posture. I come as representative of the